Yes, inflation is slightly to 1.4% in March 2025, down from 1.4% in February thanks to slower price increases in areas like personal care, dining, and housing. Some categories like education and recreation saw a slight uptick, while others like communication and clothing remained in negative territory.
Based on this news, let's take a moment to explain what inflation is.
Definition and types of inflation. So, what is inflation? Inflation is the general increase in the prices of goods and services over time. In simple words, when inflation happens, the value of money decreases. This means you need more money to buy the same things you used to buy for less. Now, let's look at the three main types of inflation. First, demand pull inflation. Second, cost push inflation. And third, built-in inflation. First, demand pull inflation. This happens when people want to buy more goods and services than what is available. This is because the demand will be higher than supply, so the seller will be raising their prices. For example, during holidays, many people shop for gifts and prices will be often to go up due to high demand. Second, cost push inflation. This occurs when the cost of making goods increases. It could be because of the higher wages, expensive raw materials, or fuel costs. Businesses will be raising their prices to cover these extra costs. For example, if oil prices go up, so the transportation becomes more expensive. Third, built-in inflation. This happens when workers ask for higher wages because the cost of living is rising. The companies then will be increasing the prices to pay those higher wages, which will be causing more inflation. This will create a cycle of rising prices and wages. In conclusion, inflation is a natural part of economy, but when it gets too high, it could hurt people's ability to afford everyday items.
Let's move on to the effect of inflation. Number 1 is decrease in purchasing power. Purchasing power among consumers has decreased due to the rising cost of goods and service. Many people are now more cautious with their spending, focusing only on essential items. This reflects a weakening in consumer ability to spend as a result of current economic pressure. Number 2, increase in cost of living. The cost of living continues to rise steadily. The increase in price of food, transportation, utilities, and housing has made it difficult for households to cover all their basic needs. This situation particularly affects low and middle income groups who struggle to manage their daily expense. Number 3, decline in saving rate. As a large portion of income is now being spent on daily necessities, the amount of money left for saving is becoming smaller. Many individuals are unable to save as much as before, and some cannot afford to save at all. This poses long-term risk to personal and household financial stability.
Inflation is the uncertainty it creates for investors. When prices are unpredictable, decision-making becomes risky and confidence drops. Before that, what is uncertainty in investment? This refers to the difficulty in predicting future returns. When inflation is unstable, businesses and individuals can't confidently plan for the future. Next, how inflation creates uncertainty. Inflation causes raw materials prices, wages, and borrowing costs to change rapidly. This makes it hard for companies to forecast cost, revenue, and profit margin, which discourages long-term investment. For example, during period of high inflation such as the 1970 oil crisis or more recently during global supply chain disruption, companies delay investment due to the unpredictability of cost. Will this impact country's economy? Yes, it will. When investors lose confidence, they invest less. That means fewer factories are built, fewer jobs are created, and overall economic growth slows down. Inflation not only affects your grocery bill, it affects a country's future. When inflation is high and unstable, investment slows down, but with strong economic policy and stability, confidence can be restored. Effect is exchange rate volatility. Meaning of exchange rate volatility is large or unpredictable movement in the value of a currency. Inflation is a major trigger as it reduces a currency's purchasing power. How inflation affects currency value? When inflation is high, the value of a country's currency usually falls. This makes import more expensive and create uncertainty in global trade and investment. Did you know exchange rate volatility impacts businesses too? It is because volatility exchange rates complicate pricing, profit forecasting, and trade agreements. Businesses that rely on imports or export suffer, and investors may pull out due to uncertainty. Inflation will also give impact on international competitiveness. What is international competitiveness? International competitiveness refers to how well a country's goods and services perform in global markets compared to other countries. Inflation plays a big role here. How will inflation harm competitiveness? When domestic prices rise faster than those of trading partners, exports become more expensive. Foreign buyers may turn to cheaper alternatives from other countries, hurting the export sector. For example, if Malaysia faces 7% inflation while a competitor like Vietnam has only 2%, Malaysian products become less attractive abroad. This weakens our trade advantage.
I think inflation affects everyone, but some groups are more at risk. For example, in Malaysia, the low-income group is called the B40. Inflation means that the price for things like food, clothes, and transportation go up. When price increase, they end up spending more money to buy needs. They might have to cut back on spending for things like going out, buying new clothes, or even saving for the future. To deal with rising price, some people in the B40 group might use credit card or take loans to help pay pay for things like food or bill. But if inflation also causes interest to go up, they will have to pay back even more money in the future. This can make them trapped in a cycle of debt, where they owe money and more money but struggle to pay it off. Next is worker. As the price of material and energy go up due to inflation, companies may struggle to keep their profit at the same level. For example, if the cost of steel increase, companies that rely on this material will face higher costs to produce their product. To manage this extra cost, they might choose to reduce the number of workers they employ. This situation can make it harder for workers to find stable, long-term jobs.
Cause of inflation. Here got two causes of inflation. The first is cost push inflation. What is cost push inflation? Cost push inflation occurs when prices rise because production costs such as raw materials and wages increase. The demand for goods remains unchanged, while the supply of goods decline due to the higher cost of production. As a result, the added production costs are passed on to consumers through higher prices for the finished good. The first key cause of cost push inflation is increase in raw material prices. When essential inputs like oil, steel, food commodities, for example, wheat and corn, become more expensive, production costs rise. The second key cause of cost push inflation is wages increases. If workers demand and receive higher wages, especially across large sector, this increases labor costs for employers. And the last key cause of cost push inflation is currency depreciation. When a country's currency loses value, the cost of imported goods and raw materials rises. Businesses reliant on imports will face higher input costs, which they may pass to the consumer.
Besides that, there is demand pull inflation. Demand pull inflation, which happens when total demand outpaces the economy productive capacity. At its core, demand pull inflation follows a simple economic principle, and that is too much money chasing too few goods. When aggregate demand, which is sum of consumption, investment, government spending, and net exports, grows faster than aggregate supply, prices will get pulled upward. There are several factors can trigger this imbalance, such as lowering interest rates, fiscal stimulus like tax cuts or increased spending, and rising consumer confidence and wealth effects. Initially, businesses respond to higher demand by increasing output, but as the economy approaches full employment and maximum capacity, bottlenecks emerge. Wages rise as labor becomes scarce. Production costs increase, and this gets passed through as higher prices. We saw this clearly in 2021 when pent-up post-pandemic demand met constrained supply chains, pushing inflation to multi-decade high in many countries. While demand pull is just one inflation source, it's particularly relevant in growing economies and helps explain why central banks carefully monitor demand conditions when making policy decisions.
On to strategies for inflation control. The first strategy is monetary policy. In response to inflation, the central bank could increase interest rates. High interest rates mean loans, credit cards, and mortgages become more expensive. This discourages people and businesses from borrowing. Therefore, with higher cost of borrowing and more incentive to save due to better interest on savings, consumer demand and business investment fall. Low demand leads to slower economic growth. Companies may produce less and delay expansion plans. Since demand is lower, there's less pressure on prices to rise, which helps to reduce inflation. Next, I will continue with fiscal policy. To control inflation, the government will raise income taxes. This causes people to have less disposable income. Besides, the government will also reduce spending so that less money is pumped into the economy. With less income and lesser government activity, overall demand for goods and services falls. Lower demand will lead to slower price increases or even falling prices, and hence this reduces inflation.
Alright, so the next one is on the supply side policies. It's policies about helping the economy produce more. So this can be done by reducing the business costs, like giving tax cuts or easing certain regulation. The government can also invest in things like technology or better infrastructure. When it's easier and cheaper to produce the goods, the supply increases. And when there's more supply, businesses don't have to raise prices as much. So this can help to keep the inflation under control. And the next one is on the wage and price controls. It's when the government will set limits on how much wages and prices can go up to. And this is usually done when inflation is really high. So by capping wage increases and price hikes, it helps to break the cycle of higher wages leading to higher prices and then more wage demands. So it's a way to slow things down and stop inflation from getting worse.